Mr. President, I will be blunt. I am largely uncertain as to why I am present, especially considering the absolute firestorm currently consuming your reputation outside these walls. The internet is exploding right now with the newest release of the Epstein files, and frankly, you are catching strays from every direction. We have all seen the documents, Donald. While Elon Musk and Prince Andrew are scrambling, the allegations against you are far more damning. The reports of you forcing yourself on underage girls, the witness testimonies about the DOE 174 designation, and the stories about orgies and trafficking at your own golf courses are disgusting. You are being exposed for having contact with Epstein even after you claimed to ban him. And your own administration is leaking that you are terrified of what is coming next. It is not just a political issue. It is a humanity issue. And standing here with you while you are accused of such moral erosion feels like a liability to my administration. California is flourishing despite your administration's persistent federal interference. Our economy currently ranks as the 5th largest in the entire world. We are guiding the nation regarding climate action, diversity, inclusion, and innovation. If this gathering is merely about your envy that we are succeeding without your assistance, I truly do not have time for such pettiness. Take a seat, Gavin. President Trump's voice sliced through Governor Gavin Newsom's prepared monologue like a knife through soft butter. It was not loud or angry, but rather absolute, the tone of someone who knew precisely how much authority he possessed in this moment. It was a cold winter afternoon inside the Oval Office. Gavin Newsom stood before the resolute desk, clad in a $1,500 Tom Ford suit, his hair slicked back with enough product to withstand a Category 5 hurricane, appearing as though he had just stepped off a photo shoot for a magazine about politicians who fancy themselves movie stars. He believed he was untouchable, as the governor of the nation's largest state. He was the presumptive frontrunner for the 2028 Democratic presidential nomination. He was a media favorite, the face of the resistance, and the supposed future of the party. He had absolutely no concept that for the previous 8 months, Trump had quietly directed the FBI and Treasury Department to execute a comprehensive forensic audit of California's finances. He had no inkling that he was about to be confronted with proof that he had been operating the state as his own private criminal syndicate. Behind Trump's desk stood FBI Director Christopher Wray, holding thick classified binders, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent with financial audit papers, and HUD Inspector General Ray Oliver Davis with analyses of California's homelessness expenditures. All 3 officials appeared grim and strictly professional. This was not a meeting regarding policy. This was a prosecution. Newsom chuckled with that rehearsed, patronizing laugh he utilized when he deemed someone beneath his station. Still standing and projecting confidence, he was on the verge of losing everything forever. Oh, please, is this merely petty revenge for 2020 political theater? I am not intimidated by $68 billion. Trump did not raise his voice because he did not need to. The number landed with the impact of a bomb. That is the amount California has expended on homelessness since you became governor in 2019. Do you wish to know what occurred to your homeless population during that period? It increased by 46%. Nearly 50% more people are living on the streets despite $68 billion being spent. He slid a dense folder across the resolute desk using a single finger. So I am going to ask you a very elementary question, Gavin. Where did $68 billion go? Newsom's confident smile began to fracture ever so slightly, resembling a hairline crack in expensive porcelain. Trump did not wait for a response. I will tell you where it went. It went to your major political donors. It went to nonprofits managed by your campaign fundraisers It went to consulting firms that kick money back into your political operation. You have been systematically stealing from California taxpayers while people are literally dying on the streets. While California burned, while people could not afford rent, and while the middle class fled to other states, you were stealing billions. He leaned forward slightly, and I can prove every single word of it. FBI Director Wray stepped forward, opening his binder with the efficiency of someone who had done this 1,000 times. Governor Newsom, for the past 8 months, the FBI has been conducting a comprehensive audit of every major homelessness contract California has awarded since you took office. We have identified $23 billion in provably fraudulent spending. He placed documents on the desk where Newsom could see them. Bank records, contract awards, and corporate filings were laid out. State contracts were awarded to companies owned by your top political donors. There was massively inflated billing for services that were never actually rendered. Fake consulting work resulted in kickbacks flowing directly back to political organizations you control. This is not speculation. We have the paper trail. Treasury Secretary Besant added her evidence, her voice crisp and professional. Your family's wine businesses, Plump Jack Group, Odette Estate Winery, and Cade Winery, have received $47 million in state contracts, tax breaks, and agricultural subsidies since you became governor. That is textbook self-dealing. You used your governmental position to directly enrich your private business interests. Under California law, that is illegal. Under federal law, that is fraud. HUD Inspector General Davis delivered the final blow. We have also identified $340 million in wire transfers from state contractors to shell LLCs that are directly connected to your political operation. That is not campaign contributions. That is money laundering. That is organized fraud. Under federal law, that qualifies for RICO charges. Trump let that word hang in the air. RICO stands for the Racketeer, Influenced, and Corrupt Organizations Act. It is the law used to take down mob bosses. So here is how this is going to work, Gavin. You need to listen very carefully because you are going to make a decision that determines whether you spend 6 years or the rest of your life in prison. Newsom had finally sat down. His perfect posture had collapsed. He looked like someone had just told him he had a terminal disease. Option 1, Trump said, holding up one finger. You resign as governor of California today, effective immediately. You go back to Sacramento. You face state-level corruption charges. You take a plea deal. You probably get 10 years. You serve maybe 6 with good behavior. Your political career is over, but you are out before you turn 60. He held up a second finger. Option 2 is you walk out of here. You refuse to resign because you think you can spin this. You think your media friends will protect you. Tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, I stand in the Rose Garden and I release this entire federal audit to the public. Every page, every contract, every wire transfer, and every piece of evidence will be released. The Department of Justice will file RICO charges against you for running the state of California as a criminal enterprise. Trump's voice got quieter and more personal. Under RICO, Gavin, you are looking at 25 years to life in federal prison. You will be 70 years old before you are even eligible for parole. Federal prison is not like those minimum security camps where white-collar criminals play tennis. Federal RICO defendants go to real prisons. He paused to let that image sink in. Remember that French Laundry dinner where you broke your own COVID lockdown rules while telling regular Californians they could not see their families? That was nothing. That was you being a hypocrite. It made you look bad for a few news cycles. This is different. This is you being a thief. This is you stealing billions of dollars while California literally burned. While people slept in tents on Skid Row, families fled the state because they could not afford to live there anymore. Newsom looked like he had been physically struck. His face had gone pale. His hands gripped the armrests of his chair. "You can't possibly prove that," he started weakly. "We have the contracts," Trump said flatly. "We have the bank records. We have the wire transfers. We have sworn testimony from contractors who paid kickbacks to your operation. We gave them immunity, and they are cooperating. We have your wine business's financial statements showing illegal state contracts. We have emails. We have text messages. We have 8 months of FBI investigation. This is not a bluff, Gavin. He leaned back in his chair, completely relaxed, like a poker player who knew he held a royal flush. So what is it going to be? Resign quietly and face California state charges, or get completely destroyed in federal court and spend the rest of your life in a prison cell? Newsom's perfectly styled hair suddenly didn't look so perfect. His $1,500 suit suddenly didn't make him look powerful. He looked small, scared, and trapped. It was like the presidential ambitions he had been nurturing for years had just evaporated into smoke. Trump smiled slightly. Not cruel, just satisfied. "Let me show you exactly what we found, starting with where $68 billion actually went. Because once you see this evidence, you will understand why you have no choice but to resign." He nodded at FBI Director Wray. "Show him everything." As Wray opened his first binder, Gavin Newsom realized with absolute certainty that his political career was over. The only question was whether he would spend 6 years in state prison or the rest of his life in federal prison. To understand how we got here, how California's golden boy governor ended up facing RICO charges, you have to rewind 12 hours earlier. Newsom woke up that morning thinking he was invincible. 12 hours earlier, Gavin Newsom had been in his private study at the California governor's mansion in Sacramento. He was sipping an expensive espresso and scrolling through his phone. He looked at political news, polling data, and profiles of him in glossy magazines. His approval rating among California Democrats was 73%. His national profile was higher than any governor, except maybe DeSantis. He was the future. His phone buzzed with a reminder about today's meeting. White House, 3 p.m., urgent discussion regarding federal-state program coordination. He had received the call 2 days earlier from Trump's chief of staff. It was very formal and very official. But there were no details beyond the meeting time and the vague subject line. That was unusual, but not alarming. Federal-state relations were always contentious with Trump. This was probably about sanctuary cities or California's climate regulations that exceeded federal standards. Or maybe Trump wanted to grandstand about immigration. His chief of staff, Jennifer Siebel Newsom, his wife, walked into the study with her tablet. "You need to leave for the airport in an hour. Do we have a strategy for the White House meeting?" Newsom waved dismissively, still scrolling his phone. Trump is completely flailing. His approval rating in California is what, 32%? That is the lowest of any Republican president in state history. He knows I am the front-runner for 2028, and it is driving him absolutely insane. This is just him trying to intimidate me before I officially announce my campaign. The summons mentioned a federal audit of state programs, Jennifer noted, her lawyer instincts making her cautious. That specific language could indicate something substantive. Newsom finally looked up from his phone. smiling that confident smile that had won him elections for 20 years. Federal audits happen constantly. It is bureaucratic noise. We have an entire team of lawyers whose job is handling compliance. If Trump genuinely thinks his people are going to find some smoking gun in California's finances, he is even more delusional than I thought. He stood up, stretched, and looked at himself in the mirror on the wall. He was still fit at 57. He still had the look, the hair, the jaw, and the charisma. He had been called the best-looking politician in America so many times it wasn't even flattering anymore. It was just a fact. California's budget is complex, sure, he continued. Biggest state economy in the country, but everything is documented and defensible. We have receipts for everything. His communications director joined them via video call on the tablet. Should we prepare defensive messaging just in case there is something specific? Prepare the standard talking points, Newsom instructed. Federal overreach, Trump attacking California because we lead on climate and immigration, Republican intimidation of Democratic governors. But honestly, I am not worried at all. This is theater. What Newsom could not see, what he had never imagined, was that in the months before this meeting, President Trump had become personally obsessed with California's homelessness crisis. Not for political reasons, but because the numbers offended him as a businessman. How do you spend $68 billion and make the problem worse? Trump had quietly ordered an investigation. A real investigation. FBI, Treasury, and HUD Inspector General subpoenas to contractors, forensic auditing of bank records, and immunity deals for people willing to talk were all utilized. He was building a case the way you would build a case against organized crime. Because that is what Trump suspected it was. Organized crime, just with better suits and wine tastings instead of strip clubs. That same morning at 6 a.m., President Trump sat in the White House Situation Room with his investigation team. It was the secure conference room deep below the West Wing. No phones were allowed. No recordings were made. Just the people who needed to know. FBI Director Christopher Wray sat to Trump's right with 3 thick binders in front of him. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent sat across from him with financial forensics reports. HUD Inspector General Ray Oliver Davis sat at the end of the table with statistical analysis. The White House counsel sat next to her with legal strategy documents. The table was covered with evidence. Organizational charts showing money flows, contract awards, bank statements, wire transfer records, and testimony transcripts were scattered everywhere. 8 months of investigation were condensed into a case that would destroy a governor. Trump looked fresh despite the early hour. He loved this kind of thing, following the money, exposing corruption, and building an airtight case. This was what he did in business for 50 years before politics. "Walk me through it one more time," he said. "I want to make sure we have him dead to rights before this meeting." HUD Inspector General Davis began. She was a career auditor who had spent 30 years following government money. This was the biggest fraud case she had ever seen. "Mr. President, we completed the comprehensive audit you ordered 8 months ago. California homelessness spending since Gavin Newsom took office in January 2019 is the focus. The numbers are staggering." She pulled up a chart on the secure monitor. Total spending is $68 billion across state and local programs funded by state money. That is not an estimate. That is documented spending we can verify through state budget documents. During that exact same period, she continued, California's homeless population increased from approximately 151,000 to 181,000. That is a 46% increase. Despite spending $68 billion, you have 46% more people living on the streets. Trump shook his head. How is that even possible? You could have built every homeless person a house for that much money. Exactly, Davis said. So we audited where the money actually went, examining every contract over $1 million. What we found is systematic fraud on a scale I have never encountered in 3 decades of government auditing. She clicked to the next section showing contract analysis. $23 billion went to contracts that show clear fraud indicators. No-bid awards were given to companies owned by Newsom's major political donors. There was wildly inflated billing. We are talking 3, 4, or 5 times market rates. There were payments for services that were never actually rendered. Shell companies with no employees were receiving millions in payments. Consulting contracts had 0 deliverables. FBI Director Wray took over, his voice carrying the weight of someone who prosecuted organized crime. We have identified a systematic criminal enterprise. It works like this. Individuals or companies make large donations to Newsom's campaigns or to allied PACs. Those same donors then receive massive state contracts, often through no-bid processes. They bill far above market rates. Then portions of that money get kicked back to political organizations that Newsom controls or directly benefits from. He showed an organizational chart on the screen. It is a closed loop. Donate to Newsom. Get a state contract worth 10 times your donation. Bill inflated rates, and kick money back through consulting fees, speaking fees, or contributions to Newsom-aligned PACs. It is money laundering. It is fraud. It is a criminal enterprise. Let me give you one specific example that shows the whole pattern, Wray continued. Thomas Steyer, billionaire climate activist, is one of Newsom's biggest donors and closest political allies. Steyer's investment fund owns a major stake in a nonprofit called California Housing Solutions. That nonprofit has received $340 million in state homelessness contracts since 2020. He let that number land. $340 million. We audited what they actually built. 400 units of supportive housing over 4 years. That works out to $850,000 per unit. The market rate for similar supportive housing in California, and yes, California is expensive, is approximately $200,000 per unit. Where did the other $650,000 per unit go? Wray showed wire transfer records. We traced it. Significant portions went to consulting firms owned by Newsom associates. It went to lobbying groups that support his agenda. It went to political organizations in his network. The money went in a circle. State funds to Steyer's nonprofit to Newsom's network, and Newsom's network back to supporting Newsom's political career. Treasury Secretary Besant presented the next section. Her financial analysis was meticulous and damning. Beyond the general contractor fraud, we have documented clear self-dealing by Governor Newsom personally. His family's wine businesses have received $47 million in state contracts, tax breaks, and agricultural subsidies since he became governor. She showed the breakdown with the precision of someone who had spent years as a hedge fund analyst. The Plumpjack Group, which includes Plumpjack Winery, Odette Estate Winery, and Cade Winery, received a $12 million contract to supply wine to state functions and government events. Odette Estate received $18 million in agricultural subsidies and water credits. Cade Winery got $17 million in tax credits, ostensibly for environmental improvements and sustainable practices. California Government Code Section 1090 explicitly prohibits state officials from having any financial interest in contracts they influence. Newsom violated that law repeatedly, and he did not even try to hide it. He just assumed nobody would look. White House counsel outlined the prosecution strategy. We have multiple legal avenues. The cleanest approach is federal RICO. The Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act was designed for exactly this: systematic criminal enterprises. Newsom has been running California state government as an ongoing criminal conspiracy to enrich himself and his political network. RICO carries 25 years to life if convicted. But we could also go with straightforward fraud charges. Wire fraud for the interstate money transfers applies every time state money crossed state lines. That is federal wire fraud. Mail fraud for the contract documents, conspiracy, and false statements are also applicable. Each charge carries 10 to 20 years. He paused. However, there is strategic value in giving him an off-ramp. Let him resign, face state charges in California, and take a plea deal for maybe 10 years, serving 6. It gets him out of office. It destroys his political future. It avoids the media circus of a federal trial. But if he refuses, if he thinks he can fight this or spin it, we go nuclear with RICO and destroy him completely. Trump listened to everything, his sharp business mind processing the evidence. Finally, he asked the only question that mattered. How solid is this case? I do not want probably. I do not want maybe. I want to know if we charge him with RICO. Do we win? FBI Director Wray did not hesitate. The evidence is overwhelming. We have hundreds of contracts showing fraud. We have bank records proving money laundering. We have testimony from contractors who participated in the kickback schemes. We gave them immunity, and they are cooperating fully. We have Newsom's wine business's financial records showing illegal state contracts. We have emails and text messages between Newsom's staff and the contractors. If we charge him with RICO, we win guaranteed. Trump nodded slowly, that calculating look on his face that people in negotiations had learned to fear. All right, here is what we do. I bring him in this afternoon. I show him everything we have. I give him exactly one chance to resign quietly and face state charges. If he takes it, fine. If he refuses, if he walks out of here thinking he can spin this, or his media friends will protect him, then tomorrow morning I release everything publicly and we file federal RICO charges. He looked around the table at his team. California has become a complete disaster under this guy. Highest taxes in the country. Highest homelessness. Highest cost of living. Highest poverty rate when you adjust for housing costs. Businesses and families are fleeing to Texas and Florida in record numbers. Rolling blackouts, water shortages, and crime are increasing. And now we know exactly why. He has been stealing the money instead of fixing the problems. Trump's voice got harder. This ends today. Either he resigns or we destroy him. But one way or another, California gets a new governor. That afternoon, Gavin Newsom's motorcade pulled up to the White House. He stepped out looking like $1 million, which was ironic given what he had stolen. Expensive suit, perfectly tailored, hair immaculate, confident stride. He even waved at the small group of cameras that had been alerted to his arrival by his own communications team. He was escorted through the West Wing. He was expecting a contentious but standard meeting. Federal versus state authority, immigration enforcement, climate regulations, the usual partisan battles that would give him material for fundraising emails. He walked into the Oval Office and immediately felt something was wrong. Trump was not sitting with policy advisors or political staff. He was behind the resolute desk with FBI Director Wray, Treasury Secretary Bessent, and HUD-E, Inspector General Davis. All three had official binders with classification markings. This was not a policy meeting, but Newsom was committed to his plan. He launched into his prepared opening remarks about California's success. He talked about economic growth, about leading the nation on climate change, and about resisting federal overreach. The speech he had been planning since the flight from Sacramento was underway. Trump let him talk for about 90 seconds. Then he cut him off mid-sentence. "Sit down, Gavin." The tone stopped Newsom cold. Not angry, not loud, just absolute. The voice of someone who held all the cards and knew it. Because we are not here to debate policy. I am about to show you 8 months of federal investigation proving you have been systematically stealing from California taxpayers. And when I am done, you are going to make a choice that determines whether you spend 6 years or the rest of your life in prison. Newsom's confident smile died on his face. He looked at Trump, at FBI Director Wray, and at those binders full of evidence. He slowly sat down. "What are you talking about?" His voice had lost all its confidence. Trump's answer was cold and factual. $68 billion spent on homelessness since you became governor. 46% increase in homeless population. I am going to show you exactly where that money went. To your donors, to your wine businesses, to your political machine. You have been running California as a criminal enterprise. He leaned forward slightly. And I can prove every word of it. FBI Director Wray stood and moved to a presentation screen that had been set up in the Oval Office. He clicked his remote, and a simple chart appeared showing California homelessness spending over 6 years. "Governor Newsom, let me walk you through what we found. In January 2019, when you took office, California's documented homeless population was approximately 151,000 people. That was already the highest in the nation. Your campaign promised to address this crisis. You called it a moral imperative." He clicked to the next slide showing spending over the next 6 years, 2019 through 2024. California spent a documented $68 billion on homelessness programs. That is federal funds, state funds, and local funds that came from state budgets. $68 billion. Next slide. Current homeless population in California. Approximately 181,000. That is an increase of 30,000 people. A 46% increase despite spending $68 billion. Wray let those numbers sit in the air. The math was devastating. More money, more homelessness. Where did the money go? We asked that question. Wray continued. So we audited every contract over $1 million. Every major homeless services provider, every nonprofit, every consulting firm, every construction company. We obtained bank records, emails, corporate filings, and testimony from people in the system. He clicked through to show a breakdown of that $68 billion. Approximately $45 billion went to what could be considered legitimate services. Shelters, food programs, mental health services, substance abuse treatment. Those programs may or may not have been effective, but the money was spent on actual services. The remaining $23 billion went to contracts that show clear fraud indicators. Let me show you what I mean. He pulled up the first example. California Housing Solutions. This is a nonprofit that received $340 million in state contracts between 2020 and 2024. Their stated mission: build supportive housing for homeless individuals. They reported completing 400 units over 4 years. Wray did the math publicly. $340 million divided by 400 units equals $850,000 per unit. For reference, the market rate for similar supportive housing in California, even in expensive areas like San Francisco or Los Angeles, is approximately $200,000 per unit. These units were not luxury apartments. They were basic studio units with shared facilities. He showed photos of the completed units. Basic, functional, certainly not worth $850,000 each. Where did the other $650,000 per unit go? We subpoenaed California Housing Solutions financial records. We traced the money. Here is what we found. A flowchart appeared showing money movement. California Housing Solutions paid $280 million to various consulting firms and subcontractors. We investigated those companies. Most of them are owned by individuals or entities connected to your political network, Governor. Former campaign staffers, major donors, political consultants who have worked for you. He clicked through examples. Sustainable Future Consulting received $47 million for project management. The company has 3 employees. The owner, Marcus Webb, was your deputy campaign manager in 2018 and maxed out donations to your campaigns every year. What did his company do for $47 million? We interviewed him under oath. He could not describe specific deliverables beyond strategic oversight. Green Development Partners got $62 million for environmental compliance consulting. The owner donated $150,000 to your campaigns. We asked to see the environmental compliance work they produced. Some generic reports that could have been written in a weekend. $62 million. Ray went through 5 more examples. Everyone followed the same pattern. Nonprofit gets massive state contract. Nonprofit pays inflated fees to consulting firms owned by Newsom donors or associates. The money disappears into the political network. This is just one nonprofit, Ray said. We found the same pattern across dozens of organizations. State money going to nonprofits. Nonprofits paying inflated fees to politically connected consultants. The consultants then donating back to your campaigns or to PACs that support you. He pulled up a summary chart. Total we can document following this pattern. $23 billion. That is billion with a B. $23 billion that went into contracts showing fraud indicators and significant portions of it ending up back in your political operation. Newsom tried to interrupt. Those are independent organizations. I do not control them. What nonprofits you control is the contract awards, Ray said flatly. Your administration decides which nonprofits get state money. And somehow, the nonprofits that get the biggest contracts are run by your political allies and hire consultants who donate to you. That is not coincidence. That is a kickback scheme. Treasury Secretary Bessent took over, pulling up financial records for Newsom's business interests. Let us talk about your personal enrichment, Governor. You come from a wealthy family. You have always been clear about that. Your business interests include the Plump Jack Group, a collection of wineries, restaurants, and hotels in California. She showed corporate filings. When you became governor, you placed your business interests in a blind trust. That is standard practice. The trust is supposed to be managed independently, so you are not making decisions that benefit your businesses. However, we have found that your businesses have received extraordinary benefits from the state since you became governor. First example, Plump Jack Winery received a $12 million contract to supply wine for state functions and events. This contract was awarded in 2020. Second year as governor. The contract specifies Plump Jack products exclusively for major state events. Governor's mansion dinners, state celebrations, gifts to visiting dignitaries. Bessent showed market comparisons. We contacted wine industry experts and other suppliers. The market rate for comparable wine service contracts in California is approximately 1 to 2 million per year, depending on volume. Your winery received 12 million over 3 years. That is about double the market rate. But it gets more interesting, she continued, pulling up tax records. Odette Estate Winery, another property in your business portfolio, received $18 million in agricultural subsidies and water credits from the California Department of Food and Agriculture between 2020 and 2024. She showed the subsidy documents. These were justified as supporting sustainable agricultural practices and drought conservation. However, we compared these subsidies to similar wineries in the same region. The average subsidy for comparable operations was about $1 million over the same period. Your winery received $18 million. That is 18 times the average. And then there is Cade Winery. Besant continued relentlessly. It received $17 million in state tax credits for environmental improvements. Solar panels, water recycling systems, energy-efficient equipment. These are legitimate programs designed to encourage green practices. She pulled up the actual improvements made. The solar installation at Cade cost approximately $4 million, according to the contractor we interviewed. The water system was another $3 million. Total legitimate improvements were about $7 million. The winery received $17 million in tax credits. Where did the other $10 million in value come from? Newsom's face had gone pale. Those programs are administered by state agencies. I do not personally approve them. But you appoint the agency heads. Besant interrupted. You set the priorities, and somehow your businesses receive subsidies and benefits far exceeding what comparable businesses receive. California Government Code Section 1090 is very clear. State officials cannot have financial interests in contracts their offices influence. You violated that law repeatedly. She showed the total. Combined, your wine businesses received $47 million in state contracts, subsidies, and tax benefits since you became governor. Your businesses are profitable, but this state money significantly increased their profitability and your family's wealth. FBI Director Wray returned with the systematic corruption evidence. Let us look at the broader pattern of how your political operation works. We analyzed campaign contributions to your campaigns and allied PACs, then cross-referenced them with state contract awards. The correlation is undeniable. He showed a database. We identified your top 50 donors between 2019 and 2024. Individuals and companies who gave a combined total of $83 million to your campaigns, your PACs, organizations that support you. Next slide. Those same 50 donors or their associated companies received state contracts worth approximately $4.7 billion. That is a return of $56 for every dollar donated. That is not politics. That is a business investment. He walked through specific examples. Jeremy Stoppelman, tech entrepreneur, donated $850,000 to your campaigns and allied PACs between 2019 and 2023. His company received a $340 million contract to build a homeless services technology platform. The platform was delivered 3 years late and does not work according to testing by state auditors. But he got paid. Patricia Bates, real estate developer, donated $1.2 million to your political operation. Her company received $680 million in contracts to build affordable housing. She completed about 40% of the promised units, but received 90% of the money before the state finally canceled the contract. She kept the money. Martin Chang, construction company owner, donated $2.4 million to various organizations supporting you. His company received $1.8 billion in state infrastructure and housing contracts. We audited the work. Approximately 30% of it was done to standard. The rest was subpar or incomplete. But he got paid in full. Ray showed the pattern across all 50 donors. This is a systematic pay-to-play operation. Donate to Newsom. Get state contracts worth many times your donation. Deliver subpar work or no work. Get paid anyway. Then donate again for the next election cycle. We also traced where the money went after these contractors got paid. Ray continued, pulling up wire transfer records. Many of them made large payments to consulting firms, lobbying groups, or other entities that we have connected back to your political network. It is a money laundering operation. State funds to contractors, contractors to political consultants support your campaigns. He showed specific wire transfers. Johnson Construction got $440 million from the state. 3 months later, they paid $18 million to Strategic Political Advisors, a firm run by your former chief of staff. Strategic Political Advisors then made independent expenditures supporting your campaigns. The money went in a circle. HUD. Inspector General Davis presented the lifestyle evidence. Governor, the American public knows about the French Laundry dinner. In November 2020, you attended a birthday party for a lobbyist at one of California's most expensive restaurants. While the state was under strict COVID lockdown orders that you had imposed, the dinner reportedly cost $15,000. You apologized and said it was a mistake in judgment. She pulled up financial records. What the public does not know is that the French Laundry dinner was paid for by the California Medical Association, a lobbying group. That is a gift. Under California law, you are required to report gifts over $500. You did not report this one. But that dinner was nothing compared to the broader pattern of luxury lifestyle funded by others. She showed credit card records obtained through subpoena. Between 2019 and 2024, you and your wife attended approximately 180 high-end dinners at restaurants where the average bill exceeded $1,000. Based on reservation records and witness accounts, you personally paid for about 40 of these dinners. The other 140 were paid for by associates, donors, or lobbying groups. She did the math. Assuming average bills of $2,000 per dinner, which is conservative for some of these places, that is $280,000 in unreported gifts over 6 years. Each one should have been reported under state ethics laws. None were. Then there is travel, Davis continued. You have taken numerous trips to luxury destinations. Napa Valley wine tastings, Lake Tahoe ski trips, Montana fly fishing. According to travel records, many of these trips involved private jets or first-class commercial flights paid for by others. Hotel accommodations at 5-star properties were all justified as political fundraising or relationship building. She showed the receipts. We estimate approximately $340,000 in luxury travel over 6 years that was paid for by donors or associated entities. Some was reported as campaign expenses. Much was not. And even the reported travel raises questions about whether it was actually necessary political work or personal vacation disguised as politics. FBI Director Wray brought the focus back to the people who had been harmed. Governor Newsom, I want to show you something. We interviewed people living on the streets in California. People who should have been helped by that $68 billion. He played a video clip. A woman in her 50s, clearly homeless, was sitting on a sidewalk in Los Angeles. Her name was Jennifer Martinez. She had been a public school teacher until medical bills from breast cancer bankrupted her. "I see the news about how much money the state is spending on homelessness," Jennifer said to the camera. "Billions of dollars, and I am still sleeping on the street. I have been on waiting lists for supportive housing for 3 years. 3 years. Where is all that money going? Because it is not helping me." Another clip showed a military veteran named Marcus Johnson in San Francisco. "I served this country for 12 years. I came back with PTSD and could not hold a job. I have been homeless for 4 years. I hear about all these programs, all this funding. But when I try to access services, there is nothing. Waiting lists, forms that go nowhere, shelters that are always full. If California is spending billions on this, somebody is stealing the money, because we are not seeing it." Ray turned off the video. We interviewed dozens of homeless individuals across California. The story is always the same. They hear about massive spending. They see politicians talking about addressing the crisis. But they are not getting help because the money is not going to help them. It is going to your political network. He pulled up mortality statistics. Homeless deaths in California have increased 48% since you became governor. That is people dying on the streets while you were stealing the money that should have saved them. That is not just corruption. That is people dying because of your corruption. White House counsel laid out the federal prosecution strategy. "Governor Newsom, let me explain the legal situation you are facing. The FBI and Treasury Department have built a RICO case against you. RICO, the Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, was designed to prosecute systematic criminal enterprises. Mob families, drug cartels, and organizations that engage in ongoing criminal activity are targeted." He showed the legal framework. To prove RICO, prosecutors must show 1. An ongoing organization, 2. A pattern of racketeering activity, and 3. That the defendant participated in the organization's affairs through that pattern of racketeering. We can prove all 3 elements against you. Element 1. The organization. That is your political operation, your campaigns, your allied PACs, the network of consultants and donors and contractors who support you and benefit from your position. Element 2. Pattern of racketeering. We have documented wire fraud, mail fraud, money laundering, bribery, and honest services fraud occurring repeatedly over 6 years. That is more than enough for a pattern. Element 3. Your participation. You are the governor. You control contract awards through your appointments. You personally benefited through your wine businesses. You approved policy decisions that helped your donors. You participated in and directed the enterprise. He showed sentencing guidelines. RICO carries 25 years to life in federal prison. Given the dollar amounts involved, billions of dollars in fraud, you would be looking at the high end of that range. Prosecutors would likely recommend life in prison. Given the scale and duration of the criminal enterprise, we would also seek forfeiture of assets. The $47 million your businesses received illegally and any other assets we can prove came from criminal proceeds would be seized. You would be financially destroyed on top of spending life in prison. Trump had been sitting quietly, letting his team present the evidence. Now he spoke, his voice carrying absolute certainty. "So that is what you are facing, Gavin. Life in federal prison. Complete financial ruin. Your political legacy being that you are one of the most corrupt governors in American history. Your name becoming synonymous with stealing from the homeless while people died on the streets." He leaned forward. "Or you take the deal. You resign today. You face state charges in California. You take a plea for maybe 10 years. You serve maybe 6 with good behavior. You are out in your early 60s. Your businesses survive. Your family keeps most of their money. You fade away instead of getting completely destroyed. Trump spread his hands. That is the offer. Take it or leave it. But you need to decide right now. Because if you walk out of here without resigning, this meeting never happened, and tomorrow morning, I destroy you publicly. Newsom sat in silence, his mind racing through options that did not exist. Every angle led to the same conclusion. The evidence was overwhelming. Trump had him completely. The only question was, state prison or federal prison? 6 years or life. His political career was over either way. His presidential ambitions were dead. The only choice was how much he would lose beyond that. I need to talk to my lawyers, Newsom said quietly. No, Trump said flatly. You decide now, in this room. You resign and face state charges, or you fight and face federal RICO. What is it going to be? The silence in the Oval Office stretched for nearly a minute. Gavin Newsom sat frozen in his chair. His perfect hair was now slightly disheveled from running his hands through it repeatedly. His expensive suit suddenly felt like it was suffocating him. The walls of the Oval Office seemed to be closing in. He had walked in here 2 hours ago thinking he was untouchable. The future president, the golden boy of the Democratic Party. And now he was facing a choice between state prison or federal prison, between 6 years or life, between fading into obscurity or being utterly destroyed. I need time, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. No. Trump's voice was absolute. You decide now. Because the moment you leave this room, the offer is off the table. You resign right now or tomorrow morning, I release everything and file federal charges. FBI Director Wray added, his tone almost sympathetic. Governor, I have been doing this for 30 years. I have seen people in your position before. The evidence is overwhelming. You cannot fight this. You cannot spin this. The bank records do not lie. The wire transfers do not lie. The testimony does not lie. You are going to prison. The only question is which prison and for how long. Newsom looked at each person in the room. Trump was behind the resolute desk, completely relaxed. Wray was there with his binders full of evidence. Besant held financial records that could not be explained away. Davis had statistics showing people dying on the streets while he stole billions. White House counsel stood with the RICO prosecution framework. He had no leverage. He had no way out. He had no cards to play. If I resign, he said slowly, what exactly are the state charges? Trump nodded at White House counsel, who had already coordinated with California's Attorney General. California has been briefed on our findings. They will charge you with multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, and public corruption under California law. You will negotiate a plea deal. Given the dollar amounts and the cooperation you would provide about others in your network, you would likely plead to 5 counts. You would get sentenced to 10 years and serve about 6 with good behavior at a minimum security state facility. Your wine businesses keep operating. They were not directly involved in the criminal conduct. They just benefited from it. Your family keeps most of their money, except what the state sees as restitution. You would owe probably 20 to 30 million in fines and restitution. But you would survive financially. Most importantly, The council continued. This stays at the state level. No federal RICO charges. No life sentence. You serve 6 years. You are out in your early 60s. You live quietly somewhere and fade away. That is the best possible outcome for you at this point. Newsom knew he was beaten. He knew he had no choice. But his ego made him try one last time. This is politically motivated. You are doing this because I am your opposition, because California resists your agenda. I am doing this because you are a crook, Trump interrupted, his voice hard. You stole billions while people died on the streets. This is not about politics. This is about you being a criminal, and you are going to face consequences. The only question is whether you have enough sense to take the better deal. Trump glanced at his watch. You have 60 seconds to decide. Then this offer expires, and tomorrow you get the full federal treatment. The 60 seconds felt like an hour. Newsom thought about his presidential ambitions, dead. His political career, over. His reputation, destroyed. His freedom about to be taken away for years. Everything he had built, everything he had worked toward, gone. All because he had gotten greedy. All because he had thought he was untouchable. All because he had believed his own press clippings. I will resign, he said finally, the words tasting like ashes in his mouth. Trump did not gloat, just nodded. Good decision. You will draft a resignation letter. It gets released tonight. You cite personal reasons, family concerns, whatever story you want to tell. But you are done as governor as of tonight. He stood up, signaling the meeting was over. California AG will reach out to your lawyers tomorrow. You will negotiate your plea. And Gavin, do not try to run. Do not try to fight this. Because if you do, all of this becomes public, and the federal charges come anyway. Take your punishment. Serve your time. And maybe when you get out, you will understand that public service means serving the public, not serving yourself. Newsom stood on shaky legs. He walked to the door. He turned back one more time. For what it is worth, I did try to help people in the beginning. I am sure you did, Trump said. But somewhere along the way, you started helping yourself instead. That is when you became a criminal. Gavin Newsom left the Oval Office a broken man. His Secret Service detail escorted him to his car. He sat in the back seat as they drove to his hotel, staring at nothing. His mind was trying to process that his life as he knew it was over. That night, at 11 p.m. Eastern, Gavin Newsom's office released a statement. Governor Newsom announces resignation for family and personal health reasons, effective immediately. Lieutenant Governor Eleni Kounalakis, to be sworn in tomorrow. The political world exploded. Speculation ran wild. Why would California's governor, the presumptive 2028 frontrunner, suddenly resign? Family health? Personal reasons? Nobody believed it. Something had happened. But what? Trump stayed quiet. He did not take a victory lap. He did not comment. He just let the speculation build. 2 days later, California Attorney General Rob Bonta held a press conference. My office has received evidence from federal investigators regarding corruption in state homelessness spending. We are filing criminal charges against former Governor Gavin Newsom for fraud, embezzlement, and public corruption. The charges involve approximately $23 billion in fraudulent contracts and self-dealing. The details started leaking. The pay-to-play scheme, the wine businesses getting illegal benefits, the donors getting contracts, then kicking money back, the homeless crisis getting worse, while billions disappeared. California media, which had been largely protective of Newsom, turned on him with the fury of people who had been duped. The Los Angeles Times ran a devastating investigation. Where did $68 billion go? How Gavin Newsom stole from the homeless while they died on our streets. The San Francisco Chronicle wrote, "The French Laundry was nothing inside Newsom's multi-billion-dollar corruption scheme. Even progressive outlets could not defend him. The evidence was too strong. The dollar amounts were too large. The human cost was too visible." Newsom tried to mount a PR campaign. He gave an interview claiming he was being persecuted for his progressive politics. He claimed that Trump had orchestrated this and that the charges were exaggerated. Nobody believed him. Because the California AG was a Democrat. Because the evidence was public. Because people could see the homeless crisis with their own eyes and knew the money had not helped. His plea deal came in April. He pleaded guilty to 5 counts of fraud and public corruption. He was sentenced to 10 years in state prison. He would serve approximately 6 with good behavior. At his sentencing hearing, the judge was brutal. "Mr. Newsom, you had everything: wealth, power, a bright political future. You could have actually helped people. Instead, you stole from the most vulnerable. You enriched yourself and your donors while people died on the streets. You betrayed the public trust in the most egregious way I have seen in my career. I only wish I could sentence you to more than 10 years." Gavin Newsom entered California State Prison in May, inmate number S73849, assigned to California State Prison. Solano, a medium-security facility about 40 miles northeast of San Francisco. From governor's mansion to prison cell. From presidential candidate to convicted felon. From the future of the Democratic Party to a cautionary tale about corruption. 5 years later, Gavin Newsom sits in a prison cell in Solano. He is 62 years old now. The perfect hair has gone gray. The famous good looks have faded under prison fluorescent lights and bad food. He works in the prison library, one of the better jobs for inmates who aren't violent. He is eligible for parole in another year. He will likely be released at 63, having served 6 years of his 10-year sentence. His lawyers are already preparing parole applications. They are emphasizing his cooperation with investigators and his good behavior in prison. His wine businesses survived, barely. Run by his family while he has been incarcerated, they removed his name from everything. Plump Jack is now just called Napa Valley Reserve, trying to distance from the scandal. Sales dropped 60% immediately after his conviction, but have recovered to about 75% of pre-scandal levels. The businesses survive, but they will never be what they were. His personal wealth, once estimated at over $20 million, has been devastated. He paid $28 million in fines and restitution. Legal fees consumed another $8 million. He is not broke. His family had money before he went to prison, but he is no longer rich. When he gets out, he will have maybe $2 million left. Comfortable, but nothing like before. His political career is obviously completely dead. His name is synonymous with corruption. The Newsom scandal is taught in political science classes as an example of systematic state-level corruption. He is mentioned in the same breath as Rod Blagojevich and other corrupt governors. The Democratic Party has completely disowned him. They removed all mentions of him from their websites. They returned donations associated with him. Presidential candidates in 2028 ran away from any connection to him. "I never supported Newsom" became a necessary statement for California Democrats. California itself has begun to reform. The new governor, Eleni Kounalakis, implemented strict oversight of homelessness spending. She required independent audits and eliminated no-bid contracts. The spending is more transparent now. Though the homeless crisis remains severe, because the money was stolen for so long. Newsom's wife, Jennifer Siebel Newsom, divorced him 6 months after he went to prison. She kept the remaining assets and the children. She is remarried and uses her maiden name now. The children changed their last names to their mother's maiden name. They do not visit him in prison. They want nothing to do with their father. On rare occasions, a journalist tracks him down in prison and requests an interview. He usually declines. But in late 2029, he agreed to speak with a reporter from the San Francisco Chronicle. The interview was conducted in a private room at the prison. Newsom sat in his prison uniform, looking nothing like the polished politician who once graced magazine covers. "Do you have any regrets?" the reporter asked. Newsom was quiet for a long time. "I regret getting caught," he said finally. That is the honest answer. Do I regret what I did? I do not know. At the time, it did not feel like stealing. It felt like how politics worked. You help your donors, they help you. It is how the system functions. People died on the streets while you stole billions, the reporter challenged. I know, I think about that. But I did not kill them. They were homeless before I was governor. I did not create the homeless crisis. I just did not fix it. And yes, I took money that could have helped them, but I was not the only one. The whole system is corrupt. I just got caught. Do you think you deserved 10 years in prison? No. I think I was made an example of because Trump wanted to destroy California's Democratic leadership. I am a political prisoner as much as a criminal. The reporter pressed back. The California Attorney General who charged you is a Democrat. The judge who sentenced you was appointed by a Democrat. The jury that would have convicted you if you had not pleaded guilty was made up of California voters. This was not Trump. This was the people of California rejecting your corruption. Newsom had no good answer to that. I guess that is one way to see it. When you get out next year, what will you do? I do not know. I cannot work in politics. I cannot practice law anymore. My businesses have my name removed. I will probably move somewhere quiet. Montana, maybe. Somewhere people do not recognize me. Live quietly, fish, read books, disappear. You wanted to be president, the reporter said. Yeah, I wanted a lot of things. Turns out I wanted them more than I wanted to be honest. The interview ran with the headline, Gavin Newsom's prison confession, no real remorse, still blames others. Even the Chronicle, which had once been friendly to him, could not make him sympathetic. Back in Washington, President Trump was asked about Newsom during a press conference about something else entirely. Sir, Gavin Newsom will be released from prison next year. Any thoughts on his conviction and sentence? Trump smiled slightly. Gavin Newsom stole billions of dollars from California taxpayers. He enriched himself and his donors while people died on the streets. He got 10 years. He will serve 6. Honestly, I think he got off easy. But justice was served. He is in prison. California has a new governor who is actually trying to fix the problems instead of stealing the money. That is all that matters. Do you think you ended his presidential ambitions? I did not end anything. He ended his own ambitions when he decided to be a crook. I just made sure he faced consequences. That is what presidents are supposed to do. Make sure powerful people do not get away with crimes just because they are powerful. In California, the homelessness crisis has improved marginally. It is still terrible, worst in the nation, but it is not getting worse as fast. The new oversight and transparency has helped. Some of the stolen money has been recovered and redirected to actual services. People still sleep on the streets in San Francisco and Los Angeles. But now, at least the money being spent to help them is actually being spent on services rather than disappearing into political operations. Jennifer Martinez, the former teacher who was homeless and appeared in the FBI's video presentation to Newsom, eventually got housing. She lives in a small apartment in subsidized housing in Los Angeles. When asked about Newsom's imprisonment, she said, "6 years is not enough. He stole billions while we suffered, but at least he is in prison. At least he faced some consequences. That is more than most corrupt politicians get." 10 years from now, when Gavin Newsom is in his early 70s, his Wikipedia entry will be brutal. Gavin Newsom, born 1967, is a former American politician who served as the 40th governor of California from 2019 to 2025. He resigned after evidence emerged of systematic corruption involving $23 billion in fraudulent homelessness spending. He pleaded guilty to 5 counts of fraud and public corruption and served 6 years in prison. He is considered one of the most corrupt governors in California history. That will be his legacy. Not the progressive policies he advocated, not the good looks and charisma, not the presidential ambitions, just a corrupt governor who went to prison. And somewhere in Montana or Idaho or wherever he ends up after release, Gavin Newsom will live quietly under an assumed name, fishing and reading, and trying to forget that he once thought he was going to be president. He thought he was untouchable. He thought his looks and charisma and political skills made him special. He thought the rules did not really apply to people like him. He learned differently in the Oval Office. When Trump showed him evidence, he could not spin away. When he had to choose between state prison or federal prison. When his entire world collapsed in 2 hours. The golden boy of California politics ended up in a prison cell. Not because Trump persecuted him, because he was a thief who got caught. That is not persecution. That is justice. And justice, in the end, does not care how good your hair looks.